Ethiopia and Egypt to discuss the Nile Dam. Is the U.S. seeking to mediate on this issue now?
Well, we'll see what happens in those conversations. But as you know, the president and his cabinet are very active all around the globe, having different meetings and different conversations and doing things in a very unconventional, different way than previous leaders. I think you see the results of that.
Why is it that Secretary Mnuchin is in the helm of this instead of State Department?
Well, nobody said the State Department wasn't involved.
No, they're saying that they're not involved.
Well, we'll see what happens when the meetings actually occur, but it really depends on what the policy question in the meeting is. I mean, that's like asking me why does the U.S. Treasury rather than the State Department issue sanctions? Because the U.S. Treasury issues sanctions, the State Department doesn't. So it really depends what the topics are, but I don't have anything to add to that today. Anything else?
Afghanistan peace process, please.
No, I'm not answering that.
Sanctions. Who in the White House right now is in charge of quarterbacking the president's defense against possible articles?
Well, quarterbacks aren't on defense; they're on offense. But so, is that what you mean? Who's on offense or who's on defense?
Who is in charge of the defense?
Unless you said cornerback. I may have misunderstood you. Cornerbacks are on defense.
You know exactly what I meant. Who's in charge?
And you know the answer, the president. And we have many people working on that, but we have overstuffed portfolios here to begin with, working on the business of America, which does not include impeachment. I'm sure you've seen the polls, New York Times, Siena poll in these swing states where there's not an appetite, a majority appetite to impeach and remove the president. I assume the Democrats are lying to their constituents. They said they were coming here to reduce drug prices and get some infrastructure going and help in Syria, but they're not. They're trying to investigate and impeach the president. They'll need to go home and answer for that. Meanwhile, we're very busy here doing those things. So it's a combination of press and comms, I'm sure, the legal team, other people involved, but the president has been quite transparent in his daily explanation of what he thinks of the entire process and the substance.
It doesn't seem like there's any urgency to have any one person in charge of the entire response. And I mean, I hate to bring it up, you know, the adage that a person who's representing themselves has a fool for a client, although the president's not a lawyer, but I mean, wouldn't it be...
And neither are you. I'm not really sure what you're talking about, respectfully, but we have an entire team of people. The fact that you expect us to come outside every day and give you a window seat into the inner workings of everything we do here, that's not going to happen. But this whole idea, because you like palace intrigue stories, you want to know which one person is doing which one thing. Why is that?
Because so far the president has said that...
Well, so far the president hasn't been impeached, and I think it's simple math. If you have 218 votes and you have 67 votes in the Senate... No, the president's done plenty. You don't know what he's doing inside on this.
Kellyanne, let me ask you two questions. One non-impeachment related, one impeachment related. Let me start there. Do you believe at this point, given yesterday's vote, is impeachment inevitable, do you think?
Well, it certainly is possible. If Nancy Pelosi has 218 votes, she has more Democrats than 218. It really depends on how those 31 Democrats in those districts where they won and Trump-Pence won, if they're going to go home and say, I haven't done the following things I promised I do, but I did impeach the president, they're welcome to do that. But remember, too, she has said herself, we don't know that we're going to impeach the president. Steny Hoyer, confused, but let me clarify, he was confused about, he said he didn't know what an impeachment resolution was. I saw another Democrat today saying, we don't know if the votes are there. They know the votes are not there in the Senate. So if you're going to impeach the president, are you going to remove him? Unlikely. But I'm prepared for the president to be impeached. I'm prepared for the votes to not go that way, depending on what the evidence says. But we live in a democracy, Hallie, that is centered on the rule of law. And I would hope that we're going to have a process that we haven't had so far, which is out in the open, where the person being, quote, accused, or the person playing defense, in this case, is allowed to challenge witnesses and challenge evidence and present evidence and witnesses of his own. We haven't had that. All we've had is quite a secretive process and then selective leaks and disparaging lies, including coming from the mouth of the chairman of the Intel Committee himself. He should not be permitted to come outside and tell you what he thinks just happened the way he did the other day. It's not his job to tell everybody what he has concluded based on limited testimony and based on a process has been in the dark. I mean, the one time I personally could have benefited from having Adam Schiff near a camera. Has been the last couple of weeks when he's had witnesses before him, certainly not the last couple of years when he's been lying about collusion and conspiracies and impeachment. That hasn't happened.
Let me ask you about the China talks, because there's some news that seems to be, at least China says, going well, and I'm wondering if you can shed any light onto when President Trump and President Xi will meet and where, given that the president is now not traveling to APEC.
Right. Well, the president of Chile decided that people weren't traveling to APEC. And we're respecting that, obviously. So as the president himself, President Trump himself has said, Hallie, we're looking for another location, another time. The president is anxious to paper the agreement
mid-November.
That he's had.
Anxious to get it done.
We'd love to get that done because phase 1 has been agreed to and phase 2 is being worked out. I think nothing's changed insofar as President Trump and President Xi and their teams are working hard to get a mutual and bilateral trade agreement from our perspective that no longer hurts the American worker and American industry and America's economy, and indeed America. There's no reason to have a $500 billion trade deficit with China, the world's second largest economy. There's no reason to permit them to continue to have these forced technology transfers and stealing our intellectual property. We also want them to make good on their commitment to schedule and prosecute and punish fentanyl manufacturers and traffickers. That promise was made December 1st of last year. They did make good on scheduling it in May, but we're looking for punishment and regulation and action that shows us they're serious and that China doesn't want to be the drug dealer for the United States of America. We're also watching Hong Kong.
Kellyanne, Republicans broke with the president in the House on the impeachment resolution vote. Are you guys confident that you would see the same sort of unity if the Senate were to take?
Well, the 50 Republican senators or so that signed on to the letter put forth by Lindsey Graham, I thought that was a very significant show of support because they're saying we don't know what there is to investigate so far as some of the Republicans, members of Congress who have been in these secret meetings have come out and said, I haven't heard anything that's a high crime and misdemeanor. I haven't heard anything that's impeachable to date. Obviously, we're going to have live hearings now. I know everybody will be examining the witnesses and the evidence, but as we saw in other procedures, it will be the turn of the Republicans to also challenge in those witnesses or at least question them, at least cross-examine them, which is what our democracy and our rule of law dictates. And I think that for Nancy Pelosi to have said and to have committed to the country as Speaker of the House, as third in line to the presidency, several short months ago, to have committed that impeachment would need to be, quote, overwhelmingly bipartisan and have the support of the public. We're not there, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, the opposition was bipartisan. A couple of Democrats broke with her. And so I think it's incredibly disappointing that she keeps changing her mind, her commitment to the public. Impeachment was not overwhelmingly bipartisan to vote for this inquiry. And we don't have a majority of Americans saying impeach and remove when the questions are asked the right way, when they're asked not in national polls. I never did a single national poll when I was campaign manager. Why would that be relevant? You got to look state by state. And in those states where these members are, I also don't understand why Nancy Pelosi sacrificed so many of her members yesterday, but that's her problem, not mine. Why not let some of why not let the vote be a simple majority and then let some of those members who are wringing their hands over whether or not to proceed not have to vote or vote present.
Kellyanne,
she represents a safe district, but they don't.
Kellyanne, are you concerned that once these proceedings go public, that it will start to shift public opinion?
I'm concerned that if the Democratic Congress continues to obsess about one issue, it's to the exclusion of everything else that we need them to help with and that they committed they would get done. It's that simple. They're simply not doing the business of America. They're not looking at all of your polls, CNN, NBC, CBS, Breakfast News, whoever is out here. They're not looking at your polls that clearly talk about healthcare, the economy, education, national security. Impeaching the president is, as far as I know, not in the top 3 of the burning issues that the country wants you to focus on, or wants them to focus on.
And very quickly, can you help shed some light on why President Trump moved his residency to Florida? Is it because the taxes are lower there? Is it because it's a battleground state? Can you just give us a sense of why?
Well, obviously he loves Florida, and he loves his property in Florida at Mar-a-Lago. And he said very clearly yesterday that he's been treated unfairly, but he speaks for many people, taxpayers who have been treated unfairly in New York. I thought it was incredibly unfortunate really disappointing of the governor of New York to try to take a cheap shot at the president. Has Andrew Cuomo seen the numbers of New Yorkers who have left New York and have stated why they left New York? Because of the high tax burden, particularly, and some other reasons. I mean, maybe he should open up some hydraulic fracturing there so he stops losing some of the New York workers to Pennsylvania and other states as well. But obviously the high tax residents of New York have fled the state for many, many years to Florida and to other states as well. Florida, obviously Texas, they don't have state income taxes. New Hampshire, Tennessee, I believe, a handful of states left. But the president made clear, and he does it with some regret, because he loves New York. That has been home for he and his family and his children and their families for many, many years. But obviously he loves Florida as well. And Florida, and I think the president is doing what many taxpayers have done, property owners have done, which is go to a state that is more hospitable to hardworking Americans who want to pay their fair share, but can't understand why the tax burden has become so confiscatory and so upside down. And frankly, I think the governor of New York should take a look at his economic policies and what's happening there.
How can he say that Mar-a-Lago is his primary residence? Has he ever gotten a driver's license? Has he had any phone bills sent there? Has he voted there? Has he volunteered there?
Well, you realize that's what people do when they change their residence, right? If you change your domicile, then you intend to reside there. So one would presume that you continue to do that. I've been to Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure you have. I'd say there are probably a few electric bills for him to pay there. And I'm not sure he drives himself anywhere, but I'll get back to you on the driver's license.
Are you concerned?
In fact, as far as I know, they don't check his passport on Air Force One either, but I'll check it out.
So is the way to go to take whatever state is the best for tax avoidance? Is
even irrelevant questions? Why?
I'm just concerned. Could this send a signal to other Americans that the best thing to do is to avoid taxes at all costs and go to the lowest tax states?
Do you think that President Trump is avoiding taxes by moving to Florida? He'll be paying taxes.
But he'll be avoiding state taxes in New York, which are high.
Hey, but what do you mean? First of all,
and city taxes in New York City.
He's making the best decision for him, but he sent a very, not even a strong signal. He sent the same statement to New York that they've heard from many overly taxed, highly taxed individuals. Many people have fled New York and other high tax states for lower tax states. That's unfortunately become a matter of high tax state to low tax state migration. And so he and the First Lady are the latest to do that. But they are joining tens of thousands of other people who have done the same thing.
And what about the salt taxes of New Jersey?
The expanding Durham investigation.
Sorry?
What do you anticipate from the expanding Durham
I don't know.
investigation?
I only know about the Durham investigation, what I read, and I'm sure it's accurate because you're all writing it and reporting it. So I only know what I read. And I think anybody who did nothing wrong at the FBI and the DOJ and the previous administration has nothing to worry about. If you did nothing wrong, if they didn't leak to any of you, and they we're just above board and trying to have a peaceful transition from the Obama administration to the Trump administration with no funny business, then nobody has anything to worry about. I'm sure that he'll find nothing.
Some people are taking
Pardon? Pardon? I mean, we already know plenty. We already know what was going on with some people at the top echelon of the FBI and DOJ, and that's too bad because the tens of thousands of honorable men and women who work at the FBI and DOJ shouldn't be thrown into that pot of the few that wanted an insurance policy and hated Donald Trump and made fun of his voters and ridiculed them as smelly Walmart shoppers. And you've read the text and the sex and all that. So I don't know what Mr. Durham will find, but I think that those who like investigations and inquiries, even ones that go on for 2+ years and cost the taxpayers $35 million, should just be patient and wait for this to play out. I'm patient.
Kellyanne, Paula White, can you please tell us your reaction to Paula White now being on the staff?
Yes, thank you.
Well, that's wonderful. We love Paula White. She'll do a great job.
Thank you, Kellyanne. A few people that are allied with the administration have hinted that Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was not loyal to this country. Can you, as the senior counselor to the president, definitively say that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman is a loyal servant to this country?
I'm not one who would or has disparaged him or anyone else who has served in uniform and is here serving at the White House. You won't hear me use those words. And so I think that there is a disagreement with his characterization of some of the comments made or the intent of different pieces of the phone call, but I will leave that to the lawyers to settle at some point, but you won't hear me say that.
Kellyanne, do you know if Turkish President Erdogan is still visiting on the 13th? And do you have a message to his guards if he does visit in light of them attacking
I'll let
Americans?
you have to direct that to the NSA.
Kellyanne, can I ask one question? The DHS announced today the extension of TPS to all Central American countries' citizens and also 3 other countries. What is the White House reaction to that, considering that the president tried to terminate this program last year and has been pretty vocal about this as well?
I don't have a reaction, but you should call DHS.
On Venezuela, is the president planning any sanctions on European countries like Spain for supporting Venezuela? That was published yesterday by Bloomberg.
Yeah. Well, you know how the president feels about Venezuela and the brutal regime there. We've had Mr. Guaido here at the White House, and we support him. Or I think they've met, and we support him. And we very much feel for the Venezuelan people, which is the main piece of consideration here, that we don't want them to suffer anymore. More than 20 pounds lost on average by each adult in Venezuela.
But to the extent of
Based on them.
sanctions to Spain?
So the president is not shy about applying sanctions where he thinks that they are necessary and helpful. But I've not discussed that particular aspect with him lately.
Kellyanne, HHS announced a policy today that allows faith-based adoption agencies to receive federal funding without compromising their beliefs on marriage. Is this the priority of the president? And what do you say to critics who say this policy discriminates against same-sex couples?
I don't want to discriminate against anyone. I think it's important for groups to be able to continue their work without being discriminated against. And I'll take a specific look at that, but I know that that was in the works for a while, and I didn't know that HHS had released it today. Again, you can call the agencies and departments. They each have their own comm shop.
Are there any circumstances or rules under which the White House would actually cooperate with the impeachment inquiry?
What do you mean cooperate? I mean, what are we cooperating with? In other words, what is being asked of us? It's all been a big secret.
The White House, you're not providing documents, you're instructing officials not to.
I would direct you to White House counsel Pat Cipollone's letter of October 8th to see what he and the president think about the entire inquiry at this point. He said it's unconstitutional and illegitimate.
Is it still
They asked for a vote and they asked for due process, and they now have both.
But do you think you can actually apply due process retroactively? Don't you think the better procedure would have been to have this out in the open from the beginning and not just selectively leak and by extension lie about what did and did not happen? I mean, how are you going to put the genie back in the bottle? Why not just have the process from the beginning? And respectfully, I keep seeing these articles and this commentary about we're focused on process, not substance. The entire Mueller investigation was process, and you loved it. The entire Mueller report, Mueller testimony was process, and you loved it. So that was an executive. That's part of the executive branch, that investigation. This is in the congressional branch. These people work for the country. They represent their constituents, and their constituents should know what they're doing and not doing behind closed doors. I haven't heard a single one of them talk about guns in weeks. That's all they wanted to talk about. It's all they wanted to talk about forever, and that was the only thing that was important, and now they don't even mention it. We had them here to talk about Syria last week or the week before, and the speaker threw a hissy fit and left before we can even have a conversation. They're not interested in anything except removing the President of the United States, and if they thought any of the merry band of 2020 aspirants could do it, they would focus on that.
Would you conduct an investigation in which witnesses could
Hi.
North Korean launched another missile yesterday. How does the president reaction of the North Koreans?
I'm sorry, one more time.
North Koreans launched another missile yesterday. How does
The president's position on North Korea is always the same. He wants complete and verifiable denuclearization. Until then, our policies are the same. The sanctions remain, and we know that they do some of their testing, but the president has never changed his position on that, and he's watching. He's willing to try to bring peace and prosperity around the world where he can, but he's not going to remove the sanctions, and he's not going to change his mind, his policy. One last one.
In Afghanistan restarted with the Taliban. Any comment?
No, not today.
Are we getting an announcement about a new DHS secretary today, since Kevin McAleenan's time is now up?
Possibly. Possibly. I don't have the timing on that, Caitlin, but obviously the president has been interviewing different people and discussing different options with his current team. And but as was just noted, DHS is still producing many good results. In fact, we see a lot of the border crossings are down. We see that some things have been stabilized, which is great. And I think that the president will just continue his push to get border security, final and full border security, merit-based immigration, and obviously DHS covers many different issues, including cybersecurity. So I thank Kevin McAleenan for his service. I enjoyed serving with him, and I wish him well. I think his time is done today, but I'd have to look at that. I think it was November 1st today, and so there will be somebody in an acting capacity. And I know the president this has been a big part of his agenda lately, is having discussions as to who should be the next acting or full-time Homeland Security Director. Thank you all. Have a very good weekend.